Welcome, dear, and take a moment to settle in. Tonight, the story moves gently backward in time, to a world without switches, screens, or glowing clocks. A world where night arrived naturally, and sleep followed the slow rhythm of the sun, the seasons, and the dark. Before electricity, darkness was not an interruption. It was expected, understood, and shared by everyone. If you enjoy quiet journeys like this one, you're welcome to like the video and subscribe. And if you'd like, you can share where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. It's always fascinating to imagine voices drifting in from across the world, all of us awake together for a moment, while history watches quietly. Now, let the lights around you soften. Lower the volume just enough to feel like you're leaning in. Perhaps allow the room to cool slightly. As daylight faded long ago, homes softened into shadow. Fires were banked low. Candles flickered briefly, then dimmed. Voices lowered, and the day slowly loosened its grip. Sleep did not begin with a decision. It arrived gradually, across villages, cities, deserts, and forests. People prepared for rest in ways shaped by their surroundings, by climate, by culture, and by the materials close at hand. Some lay on straw mats or woven reeds. Some slept beneath wool blankets or animal skins. Others rested on wooden frames, stone platforms, or packed earth floors. There were no identical beds, no standard hours, no universal rules. Only habits, passed quietly from one generation to the next. Night sounded different then, wind brushing against walls, distant animals moving through darkness, the soft crackle of embers, the steady, familiar breathing of others nearby. Sleep was often shared, sometimes interrupted, sometimes divided into gentle phases, with waking moments of stillness before returning to rest once more. In this long, quiet journey, we'll explore how people slept across different times and places, from the earliest human shelters to ancient civilizations, to medieval towns and countryside, and into the centuries just before electric light changed the night forever. There is no rush here, no sudden turns, only a slow walk through darkness, routine, and rest, guided by history and the calm pace of the past. Let the room around you grow quiet. Let the day fade away. And as the night settles in, the story begins. Before electricity, night did not arrive all at once. It was not triggered by a switch or announced by a glowing clock on the wall. Night arrived slowly, patiently, almost without being noticed at first. The sun lowered itself toward the horizon, and with it, the world began to soften. Shadows stretched longer across the ground, edges lost their sharpness, colors slowly drained from the landscape, leaving behind quieter tones of brown, gray, and blue. People felt this change long before they named it. Their bodies recognized it instinctively. As light faded, movements naturally slowed. Hands worked more carefully. Eyes adjusted, lingering a moment longer on familiar paths, doorways, and tools. There was no sense of urgency in this transition. No pressure to continue working into the darkness. No expectation that the day should be forced to last longer than nature allowed. For most of human history, daylight defined possibility. When the sun was present, life expanded outward. Work happened. Journeys were taken. Voices carried across open spaces. And when the light began to withdraw, life gently contracted again. People understood this rhythm not as a limitation, but as a guide. Fields grew quieter as farmers returned home. Markets emptied as merchants packed away their goods. Animals settled. Sensing the same shift in the air, homes became the center of attention once more. Doors were closed not out of fear, but habit. Fires were tended carefully, allowed to burn lower as the evening progressed. The day's final tasks were simple, familiar, and unhurried. There was no temptation to push beyond exhaustion, no glowing distraction pulling the mind away from the body's signals. Fatigue arrived honestly. Muscles that had worked since morning began to rest. Eyes grew heavy from natural use, not artificial strain. Breathing slowed without effort. Night was not something to resist. It was something to enter. Darkness, in this world, was expected. Children learned early that daylight would end. They watched the sky change color night after night, season after season. They learned when to return home by the angle of the sun, not by the hands of a clock. Adults planned their lives around this certainty. Tasks were measured not in hours, but in daylight remaining. Journeys were calculated by how far one could travel before nightfall. When darkness came, it did so equally for everyone. There were no neighborhoods lit brighter than others, no homes glowing against the surrounding land, no streets illuminated to stretch activity late into the night. The same sky covered villages, towns, and countryside alike. As the last light slipped away, the world grew quieter together. Birdsong faded. Insects began their steady chorus. Wind moved differently in the cooling air. Inside homes, voices lowered naturally. Conversations shortened, then softened into silence. The day loosened its grip without protest. Sleep did not begin at a precise moment. It emerged gradually, like the dark itself. People did not lie awake fighting wakefulness. They did not negotiate with their bodies. They followed the cues that had always been there. In this world, rest was not something to schedule. It was something to accept. The absence of electric light allowed the body to remain in conversation with the environment. Hormones shifted with the setting sun. Alertness faded naturally. Calm arrived without instruction. Night was not an interruption to life. It was half of it, and in the deep quiet that followed sunset, sleep became not an event, but a continuation, a gentle closing of the day. Darkness before electricity was not a sudden absence, it was a presence. Once the last light slipped beyond the horizon, the world did not disappear, it changed. Shapes softened rather than vanished. Familiar spaces became outlines remembered by the body, instead of confirmed by the eyes. Movement slowed, not from fear, but from awareness. In this darkness, people learned to live gently. Moonlight often became the brightest guide. On clear nights, it washed rooftops, fields, and paths in pale silver. On cloudy evenings, darkness deepened, thick and quiet, absorbing sound and motion. Stars filled the sky in a way few modern eyes ever experience. They were not scattered points, but dense rivers of light, stretching endlessly overhead. The sky itself became a map, a clock, and a companion. Indoors, darkness gathered quickly. Walls closed in softly. Ceilings vanished upward. Corners dissolved into shadow. A single candle could carve out only a small island of visibility. Beyond its glow, the night remained untouched. People did not attempt to banish the dark. They accepted its boundaries. Rooms were arranged with this in mind. Furniture stayed in familiar places. Tools were returned to the same spots night after night. Paths through homes were memorized through repetition rather than sight. Feet learned the floor. Hands learned door frames. Bodies learned where to turn, where to pause, where to sit. In the absence of bright light, the senses shifted. Hearing became more attentive. The creak of wood, the settling of stone, the distant sounds of animals, wind, or water. Smell became more noticeable. Smoke from the hearth, wool and linen warmed by the day. Earth carried inside on shoes and hems. Touch replaced sight as the primary guide. Rough wood, coal stone, the familiar weight of fabric and skin. Darkness encouraged stillness. People moved less once night had fully arrived. Not because they were forbidden to move, but because there was little reason to. Tasks requiring precision were left for daylight. What remained was simple and slow. A final check of the fire, a shared cup or bowl, a few quiet words exchanged in low voices. Then silence returned. In many places, silence was not total, it was layered. Crickets and insects filled the air with steady rhythm. Animals shifted in barns or nearby fields. Wind brushed against walls, trees, and roofs. These sounds were not distractions. They were familiar, expected, even comforting. People grew up knowing them. They slept within them. Darkness also changed the way people thought. Without constant visual stimulation, the mind softened, thought slowed, attention drifted inward. Stories were remembered rather than watched. Prayers were repeated rather than read. Memories surfaced without effort. The absence of light created space for reflection without pressure. There was no sense that time was being wasted. No feeling that something else should be happening. Night had its own purpose. For many, darkness carried a quiet sense of protection. If one could not see far, neither could others. The world felt smaller, closer, held together by shadow. Families often slept close together for this reason. Not out of fear, but familiarity, shared warmth, shared presence. Darkness reminded people that they were not alone. Entire households experienced night together. Entire communities rested under the same sky. When one fire dimmed, others nearby did the same. When voices quieted in one home, they quieted across the village. Sleep happened within a collective pause. This shared darkness shaped expectations. No one expected instant response. No one anticipated late-night activity. No one waited for messages or signals to arrive after sunset. Night was allowed to be night, and within that permission, the body learned to rest deeply. Darkness signaled safety rather than threat. It marked a boundary where effort ended and restoration began. As people lay down, their eyes no longer searched for light. They closed easily. The world had already done the work of dimming for them. Evenings before electricity carried no sense of urgency. As the last usable light faded, the pace of life adjusted on its own. There was no struggle to remain alert, no effort to push through fatigue. The world itself encouraged rest. Work ended not because a clock demanded it, but because hands could no longer see clearly, and eyes no longer wished to strain. Fields emptied quietly. Tools were set aside. Animals were gathered in and settled. Inside homes, the rhythm of the day loosened. Fires that had burned brightly during daylight were allowed to soften. Flames were coaxed lower, not fed. Embers glowed steadily, offering warmth without brightness. Light became something to conserve. Candles were used with intention. Oil lamps were trimmed carefully. No flame was wasted without reason. People understood the value of light because they felt its absence so clearly. Each small glow was respected. As illumination dimmed, voices followed. Conversations shortened. Laughter softened. Stories, if told at all, were spoken slowly and quietly. The body responded naturally to this change. Eyes adjusted to the low light and then welcomed its disappearance. Muscles that had worked since sunrise began to release tension. Breathing deepened without instruction. Evenings were not filled with stimulation. They were filled with repetition and familiarity. The same routines occurred night after night. The same movements. The same gestures. Clothing was loosened or layered depending on the season. Bedding was arranged. Sleeping spaces were prepared with care. There was no expectation of perfect comfort, only sufficient warmth and rest. Meals, if eaten in the evening, were simple, warm broths, bread, leftovers from the day. Food was not meant to energize at night, but to satisfy gently. After eating, activity decreased further. People sat, they rested, they waited. Waiting did not feel empty. It felt appropriate. Night was not something to fill. It was something to enter. Children grew drowsy early, guided by the same fading light. Adults followed soon after. Not far behind, there were no distractions pulling attention outward, no distant events unfolding on screens, no expectation to remain connected beyond the immediate space. The world became small and local. What mattered was nearby, the warmth of the fire, the presence of others, the quiet. Fatigue was not something to overcome, it was welcomed. People listened to their bodies because nothing interfered with that conversation. When the eyelids grew heavy, they were allowed to close. When the body leaned toward rest, it was not resisted. Sleep approached gently, without negotiation. Evening, in this world, was not a battle against wakefulness. It was a gradual surrender. The dark did not arrive to force sleep. It arrived to invite it, and most nights, the invitation was accepted without question. Before electricity, night was rarely experienced alone. As darkness settled, it did so evenly, spreading across homes, streets, fields, and paths at the same pace. There were no isolated pools of brightness pushing back the dark, no windows glowing late into the night while others slept. Entire communities entered evening together. In villages, doors closed softly one after another. Fires dimmed across multiple homes in quiet unison. Footsteps faded from paths and courtyards. In towns and cities, activity slowed in waves. Markets emptied. Workshops closed. Voices that had filled streets during the day dissolved into the night air. The absence of light created a shared pause. People knew, without checking, that others nearby were also settling down, that neighbors were eating their last meal of the day, that families were arranging bedding, that animals were quieting in stables and pens. The shared rhythm brought a subtle sense of comfort. Night did not isolate individuals from one another. It connected them through simultaneous rest. Sleep often happened in groups. Families shared rooms. Children slept close to parents. Servants, apprentices, or extended relatives rested nearby. Warmth was shared. Breath was shared. Presence was shared. Privacy, as it is understood today, was rare, but solitude was not always desired. There was reassurance in hearing another person breathe, in sensing movement nearby, in knowing that if something stirred in the night, it would not be faced alone. Darkness made this closeness feel natural. Without light, the boundaries between people softened. Voices were unnecessary. Sight was limited. What remained was proximity. Nighttime sounds became communal experiences. A distant animal call, wind moving through trees, rain touching rooftops. These sounds were not startling. They were expected, shared, and familiar. People grew accustomed to them from childhood. They slept within them easily. Because night belonged to everyone, there was little fear of missing out. Nothing important was happening elsewhere. The world had agreed to rest. This collective stillness shaped expectations about sleep. No one felt pressure to remain alert. No one worried about being unreachable. No one anticipated interruptions from beyond the immediate space. Sleep was protected by the silence of others. When someone stirred in the night, it was noticed gently, a shift of weight, a quiet breath, a whispered word if needed. The night was forgiving. Time moved differently in the dark, without visible hours passing. Moments blended together. Wakefulness and sleep flowed naturally into one another. The body was allowed to drift without supervision, and when sleep came, it came into a world that had slowed together, a world that rested as one. This shared darkness formed the foundation of how humans learned to sleep, not as isolated individuals, but as part of a quiet, breathing whole. Long before houses, villages, or cities, sleep began in much simpler places. The earliest humans did not retreat indoors at night. There were no walls to close, no doors to fasten, no rooms to separate one body from another. Sleep happened outdoors, beneath open skies, among trees, rock shelters, and shallow caves. Night, in this distant past, was vast. The sky stretched endlessly overhead, filled with stars brighter than any seen today. The moon rose and fell without obstruction. Clouds drifted slowly, reshaping the darkness hour by hour. For early humans, night was not silent, it was alive. Insects hummed steadily, animals moved through brush and grass, wind carried scents across long distances. These sounds were not alarming. They were signals. They told of movement, of weather, of presence. Sleep in this world was shaped by awareness rather than fear. Early humans learned to rest while listening. Fire changed everything. When flames appeared at the center of camps, night grew smaller. Darkness pulled back just far enough to create safety. Shadows flickered instead of closing in. Warmth spread outward in slow, comforting waves. Fire did not erase the night, it softened it. Groups gathered close together around the flames. Bodies formed loose circles. Children slept nearest to warmth. Adults rested within reach of one another. Sleep was shared, layered, and light. No one slept deeply for long stretches. Instead, rest came in waves. Some drifted off, while others remained alert. Awareness passed quietly from one person to the next. This pattern was not planned. It emerged naturally. Someone always stirred. Someone always listened. The fire crackled gently, offering reassurance. Its glow marked the center of the group. Beyond it, darkness waited patiently. Early humans learned where to place themselves for sleep. Near enough to warmth. Far enough to avoid sparks. Close enough to others to feel protected. The ground beneath them was simple. Packed earth, leaves, grasses, animal skins laid out for comfort and insulation. There were no pillows, no blankets in the modern sense, only materials taken directly from the surrounding world. The body adapted to these conditions. Bones grew accustomed to firm surfaces. Muscles relaxed without softness. Postures shifted naturally through the night. Sleep was not expected to be uninterrupted. Waking briefly was normal. Rolling over was common. Listening was constant. Dreams came lightly, woven into shallow rest. Morning arrived without surprise. As the sky lightened, people stirred. Fire was rekindled. Movement returned gradually. Sleep ended not because it was complete, but because light had returned. In these earliest nights, humans learned that sleep did not require silence, darkness did not require fear, and rest did not need isolation. It required rhythm, warmth, and the presence of others. As generations passed, early humans began to return to the same places night after night. Rock overhangs offered protection from wind and rain. Shallow caves held warmth longer after sunset. Clusters of trees broke the force of cold air and muffled distant sounds. These places became familiar, not homes in the modern sense, but reliable points of return. With familiarity came subtle changes in how people slept. Sleeping places were chosen carefully, not too far from water, not too exposed to open ground, close enough to resources, yet sheltered from the worst of the elements. The land itself guided these choices. Over time, certain spots within these shelters became preferred. The ground was worn smoother. Ash from old fires layered the earth. Scattered leaves and grasses accumulated where bodies rested repeatedly. Sleep began to settle into patterns. Fire remained central. It was built in the same location whenever possible. Its position shaped the arrangement of bodies around it. Too close, and heat disturbed rest. Too far, and cold crept in. Through experience, balance was learned. The circle around the fire became a nightly formation. Children rested nearest the warmth. Older members positioned themselves where they could observe both the fire and the darkness beyond. This was not hierarchy as much as habit. Each person learned where they felt most comfortable. Positions changed slowly, almost imperceptibly. Over time, the presence of others shaped sleep deeply. Bodies rose and fell together with breath. Subtle movements rippled through the group as someone turned or shifted. These motions were reassuring rather than disruptive. No one expected absolute stillness. Sleep was understood as something flexible. Shelter altered sound. Wind that had once moved freely now whispered against stone or bark. Rain softened as it struck overhead surfaces. The crackle of fire echoed gently instead of dispersing into open space. These changes made rest easier. Darkness within shelters felt different. From open night, it was contained, held. Shadows moved across walls, animated by firelight. They were watched without alarm. The body learned the boundaries of the space. Hands brushed familiar stone. Feet found the same ground. Even in darkness, orientation came easily. This familiarity allowed deeper rest. People began to sleep slightly longer at a time. Awakenings still occurred, but they were calmer. Listening replaced scanning. Awareness softened. Materials gathered from the environment slowly improved comfort. Animal skins were layered more deliberately. Grasses were replaced when they flattened. Simple bedding took shape without intention, guided only by what felt better. These early sleeping surfaces were firm, but they insulated against cold and damp. The body adapted to them fully. Posture shifted naturally through the night. Sleeping on the side, on the back, curled inward for warmth. No single position dominated. Movement was part of rest. Evenings grew quieter as night deepened. Fire was allowed to burn lower once everyone had settled. Flames softened to embers. Light dimmed gradually. The transition into sleep was unforced. There were no final tasks to complete. No last checks to make beyond the fire itself. The world outside the shelter continued as it always had. Animals moved. Wind passed. The sky shifted. Inside, rest took hold. Morning returned slowly. Light seeped back into the shelter. Birds signaled the coming day. Bodies stirred one by one. Sleep ended not sharply, but as a gentle release. These early shelters marked a quiet turning point. Sleep was still shaped by nature, but it was now supported by place, by routine, and by memory. Night became something humans expected, prepared for, and entered with calm familiarity. As shelters became familiar and nights more predictable, sleep slowly changed. Early humans no longer rested only in short, cautious intervals. The constant alertness of open nights softened. Trust grew in the shelter, in the fire, in one another. Sleep lengthened, not into the deep, uninterrupted rest of modern nights, but into flowing cycles of light sleep and gentle waking. The body learned this rhythm naturally. Someone might drift off while another remained awake. Later, roles would shift without words or instruction. Awareness moved quietly through the group, passing from one set of listening ears to another. This was not vigilance born of fear. It was a shared attentiveness that required little effort. Most awakenings were brief. Eyes opened. Sounds were checked. The fire was observed. If nothing had changed, sleep returned easily. Darkness was no longer something to evaluate. It was familiar, predictable. Dreaming occurred close to the surface of sleep. Images came softly, blending with sounds of the night. Firelight flickered through closed eyelids. Sleep did not demand isolation or silence. It adapted to movement, sound, and presence. This flexibility made rest resilient. Children learned these patterns early. They fell asleep surrounded by breathing, warmth, and quiet motion. Waking in the night did not alarm them. It was expected. The boundary between waking and sleeping remained thin, crossed easily in both directions. Fire continued to anchor this rhythm. As flames dimmed, sleep deepened. As embers shifted or crackled, someone stirred. Morning did not interrupt rest, it replaced it. Light crept back into shelters slowly. Bodies woke as they had fallen asleep without urgency. These rhythms, formed over countless generations, shaped how the human body learned to rest. Sleep became something woven into life, not separated from it. And even as shelters improved and societies grew more complex, this early pattern of gentle sleep and waking never fully disappeared. It remained within the body, waiting for darkness to return. Over time, night lost its sharpness. What had once required constant attention became predictable. The sounds of darkness were learned and understood. The movements of animals, the rise and fall of wind, the quiet shifts of weather, all of it formed a familiar background. Fear gave way to recognition. Fire no longer needed constant tending. Its presence alone was enough. A low bed of embers provided warmth, light, and reassurance without demand. As flames faded, sleep deepened. Bodies relaxed more fully against the ground. Breathing slowed. Movement became less frequent. The night no longer felt like something to endure. It became something to pass through gently. Awakenings still happened, but they carried no urgency. A sound would stir someone briefly, a glance would confirm safety, and rest would return without effort. The darkness itself began to feel protective. Beyond the circle of light, the world was hidden. What could not be seen did not need to be confronted. Shelter, warmth, and presence defined the limits of concern. This sense of containment allowed the mind to release. Sleep settled deeper into the body. Dreams lingered longer. Rest became more restorative. Morning arrived without conflict. Light returned slowly, spreading across the shelter. Bird song replaced night insects. The fire was stirred back to life. Sleep ended naturally, not abruptly. These early nights shaped something enduring. They taught the human body that darkness was not danger, that waking briefly was normal, that rest did not require perfect conditions. Sleep became flexible, resilient, and deeply connected to the world around it. Even thousands of years later, these ancient rhythms remain. They surface when the lights go out, when the night is quiet, when the body remembers how to rest without being told. And from this foundation, from fire, shelter, and shared night, sleep would continue to evolve. In ancient Egypt, night arrived gently. As the sun lowered toward the horizon, its heat softened, and the long day along the Nile began to loosen its hold. Shadows stretched across mud brick walls. Palm leaves stirred in the evening air. The brightness of the desert faded into cooler tones of gold and blue. Life slowed naturally. Work ended not by command, but by light. Fields grew quiet. Boats were drawn in. Voices lowered as families returned to their homes. Egyptian houses were built to breathe with the day and night. Thick walls held back the heat of the sun. Open courtyards invited air to move freely once evening came. As darkness settled, these courtyards became the heart of the night. Families gathered there, sitting close to the ground. Stone and earth still held warmth from the day, releasing it slowly as the hours passed. There was no rush to sleep. The night unfolded at its own pace. Simple lamps were lit, small bowls filled with oil, a floating wick sending up a soft, steady flame. Their light did not chase away the dark. It merely softened it. Shadows moved gently across walls. The air cooled. The sounds of the day faded into distant quiet. When it came time to rest, sleeping spaces were prepared with care. Beds were low or close to the ground. Many people slept on woven reed mats, flexible and cool beneath the body. Others laid mats directly on packed earth or stone floors. Linen sheets were common, especially in warmer months, light, breathable, and smooth. They rested easily against the skin. Instead of pillows, flat headrests supported the neck. Carved from wood or stone, they lifted the head slightly, allowing air to move freely and helping keep insects away. These headrests shaped posture and sleep alike. The body learned to rest differently, balanced rather than sunk. Sleep in ancient Egypt was often shared. Families slept within the same space. Children close to parents, older members nearby. Breathing blended quietly in the dark. Movement was gentle and familiar. Night sounds drifted in from beyond the walls. Insects along the riverbanks, water moving slowly in canals. Occasional distant voices carried on the breeze. None of these sounds demanded attention. They belonged to the night. As lamps dimmed, they were extinguished. Oil was precious. Darkness was not feared. Sleep came gradually. Eyes closed without effort. Thoughts softened. The body cooled as the night deepened. In ancient Egypt, rest was shaped by climate, materials, and rhythm. There was no struggle against the night, only an acceptance of it. Darkness was part of life and sleep, a natural continuation of the day. Beyond the Nile, night followed similar rhythms, even as cultures and landscapes changed. In ancient Mesopotamia, homes were shaped around inner courtyards, open to the sky and sheltered from the heat of the day. As evening arrived, these spaces cooled quickly, drawing families inward toward quieter routines. Sleep did not happen behind closed doors. It unfolded within shared rooms and open spaces, where walls held warmth and darkness arrived evenly. Mats were laid out on packed earth floors. Light coverings were adjusted as temperatures dropped. The household settled together. Oil lamps glowed briefly, then dimmed. Their flames were small and deliberate, used sparingly, never wasted. As in Egypt, darkness was expected. It was not resisted. In Roman homes, night followed a similar pattern. Though architecture grew more complex, sleep remained communal. Atriums and courtyards gathered the day's warmth, releasing it slowly after sunset. Shadows pooled beneath columns. Voices softened as the household prepared for rest. Families, servants, and enslaved people settled into their places for the night. Some slept on low beds or wooden frames. Others rested on mats or simple bedding nearby. Privacy was rare. Presence was constant. Before sleep, quiet rituals marked the end of the day. Hands were washed. Simple prayers were murmured. A final lamp was extinguished. There was no expectation of silence, only of calm. The sounds of the household continued gently. A shift of weight, a quiet breath, someone turning in their sleep. Outside, the city slowed. Footsteps faded. Animals quieted. The night claimed the streets. Sleep arrived gradually. No one rushed toward it. No one resisted it. Across these ancient worlds, rest followed the same guiding principles: darkness, shared space, and routine. Different lands, different customs, but the same quiet understanding. Night was not something to conquer. It was something to enter together. In the medieval world, night arrived with authority. As daylight faded, activity did not simply slow, it withdrew. Shops closed. Work ended. Doors were barred. Streets emptied. In towns and cities, curfews were common. Bells marked the hour when fires should be covered and candles extinguished. Not as punishment, but as protection, darkness was expected to take over. Homes were built to hold warmth, not light. Thick wooden beams, stone walls, small windows that admitted little illumination even during the day. When night fell, these spaces darkened quickly. Inside, a hearth glowed softly. Fire was central, but carefully managed. Wood was valuable. Sparks were dangerous. As evening progressed, flames were allowed to die down. Embers replaced fire. Light softened into shadow. Candles and rushlights were used sparingly. Their glow was weak, but sufficient. Shadows moved gently across walls and ceilings. The air cooled. Silence deepened. Families gathered close. Medieval households were rarely quiet during the day, but night demanded restraint. Voices lowered. Movement slowed. Tasks became fewer and simpler. Clothing remained on. Undressing fully was uncommon. Layers provided warmth against the cold that crept in once the fire faded. Beds were shared. Parents, children, and sometimes extended families slept together. Servants or apprentices rested nearby. Privacy was secondary to warmth. Mattresses were stuffed with straw, wool, or feathers, laid atop wooden frames or simple platforms. Heavy blankets were pulled close, their weight both insulating and comforting. Sleep did not begin at once. The body adjusted gradually as darkness settled fully into the room. Eyes rested. Thoughts slowed. Outside, the medieval world grew still. Footsteps vanished from streets. Animals quieted in barns and stables. Wind moved through narrow alleys and across fields. The silence was not empty, it was complete. Night enclosed everything. In this quiet, sleep approached without resistance. In medieval homes, sleep was rarely solitary. Beds were shared not out of necessity alone, but out of habit and expectation. Warmth mattered. Presence mattered. A single bed might hold a couple, children, or relatives. Layered beneath heavy wool blankets, bodies lay close, conserving heat as the night cooled the room. The mattress beneath them was firm, stuffed with straw, wool, or feathers depending on means. It shifted softly as people settled into place. Sleep was shaped by weight and closeness, by the rise and fall of breathing nearby, by the quiet movement of others adjusting in the dark. These sensations were familiar, comforting. Before sleep fully arrived, small rituals marked the end of the day. Hands were washed, clothing was loosened, but rarely removed entirely. A final candle was extinguished. In many households, prayers were spoken quietly, not long or elaborate, just enough to mark the passage from day into night. The words were familiar, repeated so often they required little thought. Their rhythm soothed rather than stimulated. Church bells, distant but steady, marked the passing hours outside. They did not interrupt sleep, they framed it. The sound of bells told people where they were in the night, without asking them to act. Inside, silence returned quickly. The fire had faded to embers. Cold crept in slowly, noticed only when someone pulled a blanket closer. Windows admitted little light. Moonlight, if present, barely touched the room. Most nights were fully dark. Sleep deepened as the hours passed. Waking during the night was common. Someone might sit up briefly. Another might whisper a word or adjust the bedding. There was no anxiety in these moments. No concern about lost sleep. Rest resumed easily. Night was long, and there was time. Outside, medieval towns lay still. Curfews held. Streets remained empty. The world waited for morning. Inside, the household rested together, held by routine, darkness, and shared space. Sleep was not perfect. It was sufficient, and in that sufficiency, the body found rest. As the medieval night deepened, the world grew colder. The warmth held in walls and floors slowly faded. Stone released the chill it had stored during the day. Wood creaked softly as temperatures dropped. Inside homes, the fire was no longer a flame. Only embers remained, glowing faintly before dimming to ash. Their warmth lingered briefly, then withdrew. Cold did not arrive suddenly. It crept. People noticed it in small ways: a tightening of blankets, a shift closer to another body, a deeper curl into sleep. Time moved slowly, but it did move. The body sensed it without effort. Cold deepened, then eased slightly before dawn. Darkness thickened, then softened. Silence reached its fullest point, then gradually loosened. Sleep followed these changes. It deepened, it lightened, it returned again. No one expected the night to pass in a single, unbroken stretch. Rest was flexible. Wakefulness was brief and accepted. As morning approached, subtle signs appeared. The cold shifted. Birds stirred faintly beyond walls and shutters. The darkest hour passed without announcement. Eventually, the bells rang again, not to command, but to mark the day's return. Sleep released its hold naturally. Eyes opened, bodies stretched, breath deepened. The medieval night ended as it had begun, without hurry, and in this rhythm of darkness, silence, and gentle markers of time, sleep found its place. Not perfect, not uninterrupted, but deeply human. For most of human history, sleep did not arrive as a single, unbroken stretch. It came in phases. As night settled fully, people entered what was known as the first sleep, a deep, steady rest that followed naturally after evening fatigue. This first sleep arrived easily. The body, guided by darkness and long days of activity, let go without resistance. Breathing slowed, muscles released, thoughts faded quickly. For several hours, rest was heavy and immersive. This was the sleep that restored the body, the kind that followed physical labor, fresh air, and natural light, the kind that felt inevitable. Homes were quiet during this time. Fires were nearly extinguished, candles long gone. Outside, the world lay still beneath the darkest portion of the night. Then, gradually, something shifted, not abruptly, not with urgency. People woke. Eyes opened slowly. Awareness returned gently. Without confusion or alarm, this waking did not feel like interruption. It felt expected. The body was rested enough to surface briefly. The mind was calm, unburdened by urgency. There was no sense of oversleeping or undersleeping, no clocks to consult, no schedules waiting. The night was still long. In this quiet middle portion of darkness, wakefulness was soft and unhurried. People did not rise because they had to. They rose because their bodies allowed it. Some remained lying down, eyes open in the dark, listening to the night. Others sat up slowly, wrapping blankets closer around themselves, feeling the cool air on their skin. There was no frustration in these moments, no anxiety about returning to sleep. This waking belonged to the night just as much as sleep did. It was part of the rhythm. First sleep had done its work. The body had rested deeply. Now came a quiet pause, a space between rests. The waking that followed first sleep was not hurried. It unfolded slowly, as if the body were simply stretching within the night rather than leaving it. The darkness remained deep. No hint of dawn touched the sky. The world outside was still. In these middle hours, people moved carefully. If they moved at all, some stayed lying down, eyes open in the dark, letting thoughts drift without direction. Memories surfaced and faded. Dreams lingered at the edges of awareness. Others sat up gently. A blanket was pulled closer. A bench creaked softly. Bare feet touched cold floors or packed earth. There was no reason to speak loudly. Often, there was no reason to speak at all. This was a time for quiet activities. A fire might be stirred, just enough to bring back a faint glow. Not a flame, but warmth. Enough to push back the cold without breaking the stillness. Some people prayed, not with urgency, but with familiarity. Words were whispered or repeated silently. Phrases learned long ago, spoken without effort. Others reflected. Thoughts moved slowly in the absence of light. There were no distractions to pull the mind outward. Attention turned inward naturally. For some, this was a time for gentle conversation, a few words exchanged with someone nearby, low voices that carried only a short distance. These conversations were not plans or debates. They were observations, small reflections, shared quiet. In many households, this wakeful period passed without activity at all. People simply rested in awareness, neither fully asleep nor fully awake. The body did not demand stimulation. The mind did not seek entertainment. There was no pressure to fill the time. This pause in the night was understood and accepted. It was not a problem to solve. Sleep had not ended. It had only loosened its hold. After a while, minutes, sometimes an hour or more, the body signaled its readiness to return to rest. Eyelids grew heavy again. Breathing deepened. Muscles softened. Blankets were adjusted one last time. Embers were left to fade. Without effort, people lay back down. The night still held them. After the quiet middle hours passed, sleep returned on its own. There was no effort to summon it, no concern about whether it would come. The body simply leaned back into rest. This second sleep felt different from the first, lighter in some ways, yet calmer. The deep heaviness of early night had already done its work. Now, rest arrived as a gentle drift rather than a plunge. Breathing slowed again. Thoughts softened quickly. Awareness faded without resistance. For many, this second sleep carried vivid dreams. Images moved easily through the mind, unrestricted by urgency or interruption. The body rested in shorter cycles, waking briefly, then slipping back under. Each returned to sleep smoother than the last. Darkness began to change during this time. It remained deep, but it no longer felt endless. Somewhere beyond walls and fields, the night had begun to turn. This change was subtle, felt more than seen. The cold eased slightly. The silence shifted. The air itself seemed to prepare for morning. Sleep responded to these changes. It grew lighter, more permeable. Waking near dawn felt natural rather than abrupt. Eyes opened easily. Breath deepened. There was no jolt of alertness, no sudden demand to rise. Instead, rest loosened its hold gradually. People remained lying down, listening as the world began to stir. A distant bird call, the faint movement of animals, the soft return of life beyond the home. Second sleep carried the body gently toward day. It did not resist morning. It delivered the sleeper to it. For centuries, this rhythm shaped how humans understood rest. Sleep was not a single event, but a sequence: first sleep, waking, second sleep. Each part served its purpose, and when morning finally arrived, the body was ready. As second sleep slowly loosened its hold, the night began to change in small, almost unnoticeable ways. Darkness remained, but it no longer felt complete. Somewhere beyond walls, fields, and forests, the sky had begun its quiet shift. This moment was not marked by sound or signal. It was felt in the body. Sleep grew lighter. Breathing deepened. Awareness returned without urgency. People did not wake suddenly. They drifted. Eyes opened briefly, then closed again. Thoughts surfaced gently, then faded. The body lingered between rest and waking, comfortable in both. Outside, the first signs of morning appeared. A bird called softly, testing the air. Another answered, then fell silent again. Animals stirred faintly, sensing the change before seeing it. Inside homes, movement was minimal. Someone adjusted a blanket. Another shifted position. No one rushed to rise. There was time. This final portion of the night completed the rhythm that had guided sleep for centuries. First sleep had restored the body. The quiet waking had calmed the mind. Second sleep had carried rest gently toward day. Now, waking felt natural. When people finally rose, it was not because sleep had failed them, but because rest had done its work. The body felt prepared rather than interrupted. Morning did not steal sleep away, it replaced it. Light returned slowly, filtering into spaces that had been dark for hours. Shadows retreated. Forms became clear again. The night released its hold without resistance. For generations, this rhythm shaped how humans understood rest. Sleep was not forced into a single block. It flowed with darkness and light. And though modern life would eventually disrupt this pattern, the body never forgot it. Even now, when the night is quiet and the light is low, this ancient rhythm remains waiting to be felt again. Imagine a quiet evening, long before electric light. The sun hangs low, casting warm, fading color across the land. Shadows stretch and soften. The air cools. Slowly and noticeably, work comes to a natural end. Tools are set aside without hurry. Hands are wiped clean. The pace of the day loosens. People begin to turn inward, toward home, toward shelter, toward one another. As the sun disappears, the world does not darken all at once. Light lingers briefly, then thins. The sky deepens from gold to blue, from blue to gray. Fires are lit carefully, not to brighten the night, but to warm it. Flames flicker low, casting gentle movement across walls and faces. Their light is soft, never sharp. An evening meal is shared quietly, nothing elaborate. Food meant to satisfy, not stimulate. Warmth spreads through the body, signaling the day's close. Voices lower naturally. Conversation slows, then fades. There is no sense of missing anything. Nothing calls for attention beyond this moment. As darkness settles fully, the fire is allowed to dim. Embers glow faintly, then soften. The room grows quiet. Outside, night sounds emerge. Insects begin their steady rhythm. A breeze moves through trees or along stone walls. Inside, bedding is prepared. Mats are laid out. Blankets are arranged. Sleeping places are made familiar once more. Bodies move with practiced ease, guided by repetition rather than thought. When people lie down, it feels expected. The ground supports. The air cools gently against the skin. Breathing slows. There is no final check, no last glance at a glowing clock. Only darkness and rest waiting to arrive. As the night deepens, the world grows smaller. Details fade first. Edges soften. What remains is shape, warmth, and sound. Firelight no longer reaches far. Its glow stays close to the ground, touching only what is near. Faces disappear into shadow. Walls retreat. The ceiling dissolves upward into darkness. Outside, the night settles fully. Insects continue their steady rhythm. Wind moves slowly, brushing against leaves, wood, or stone. Occasionally, a distant animal calls not sharply, but as part of the background of the dark. These sounds do not interrupt rest. They support it. Inside, breathing grows deeper, more even. Bodies adjust once or twice, then become still. The warmth held by the day releases gradually. Air cools gently against skin and fabric. Blankets are drawn closer without thought. Sleep does not arrive suddenly. It spreads. Muscles soften one by one. Hands relax. The jaw loosens. Thoughts drift without direction, no longer anchored to the events of the day. Images come and go, unattached, unimportant. Darkness becomes complete. There is nothing left to see, and nothing left to do. The body recognizes this moment. It has known it for thousands of years. Breathing slows further. The chest rises and falls steadily. Awareness narrows. Sleep takes hold. Not deeply yet, just enough. Dreams hover at the edges of rest. Soft and fleeting, sounds blend into them easily. The night holds everything in place: the house, the land, the people resting within it. Nothing asks for attention, nothing pulls the mind outward. Only the quiet remains. As the night settles completely, sleep deepens on its own. Breathing becomes slower, more even, as if guided by the darkness itself. The body no longer holds tension. Shoulders sink. Hands rest where they fall. The weight of the day dissolves quietly. Thoughts lose their shape. What once felt important drifts away without resistance. There is no need to follow it, no need to remember. Dreams begin to form gently. They are not sharp or vivid yet. They move like mist, suggestions rather than stories, images without edges. Sounds from the night blend into them. The soft crackle of embers, the rhythm of insects, the faint movement of air. Sleep grows deeper, layer by layer. The mind turns inward, no longer anchored to the room, or the house, or the world beyond the walls. Time stretches. Moments pass without being counted. The night holds everything steady. Outside, the sky remains dark and wide. Stars shift slowly overhead. Clouds drift without urgency. Inside, the body rests as it was meant to. This is first sleep, the deep, restorative rest that follows the day's labor. The kind that arrives naturally when light has faded and the world has grown quiet. Breathing deepens further. The pulse slows. The body settles fully into stillness. Nothing interrupts this rest. The night offers no demands, only space, and within that space, sleep holds the body gently, carrying it forward through the dark. As the hours pass, the night remains steady. There is no sense of time moving forward, only the feeling of being held within it. Sleep deepens and lightens in slow waves. The body shifts once, then settles again. Breathing stays calm, even, untroubled. Dreams come and go without urgency. They rise gently, then dissolve, leaving behind only rest. Nothing pulls the sleeper away from this quiet. No light intrudes. No sound demands attention. The world outside continues its own slow rhythm. Stars move almost imperceptibly across the sky. The air cools, then steadies, somewhere far off. The night begins its gradual turn toward morning. Inside, the body responds without awareness. Muscles remain loose. The face softens. The mind rests deeply, free from effort. This is how sleep was known for most of human history, not rushed, not measured, not forced. It unfolded within darkness that felt natural and complete. There was no need to hold on to consciousness, and no need to escape it. Rest was enough. Eventually, without announcement, the deepest part of the night begins to pass. Sleep loosens slightly, not to wake, but to prepare. Breathing deepens once more. The body remains still, yet ready. The night has done its work. And long before anyone notices the first hint of dawn, rest has already settled fully into the body. Here, in this quiet moment between darkness and morning, nothing more is required. The night continues. Sleep continues. And the story, for now, gently fades. Sleep softly. Traveler of the night, may the past be gentle in your dreams. Until then, good night.